on three things: the who, the message, and communication. That is both for me about listening and speaking to the population. So the who in Massachusetts, our department is really designed to serve all the children in Massachusetts, and this has been very hard to hold on to. You have to work really hard to constantly saying it's about 1,000,003 kids. It's about every child from birth to 13, because we also care about the opportunities in after school and out of school time. But a lot of our money is money around the Child Care Development Block Grant. So you often find people retreating back to definitions about low income or definitions about high needs children. One communication change that I made last year was to stop talking about low income children and start talking about high needs children, using the multiple risk factors, or if you're talking to pediatricians, they use adverse health conditions as a way to define who we're talking about. Because we can all think about children who have one risk factor, and we can certainly start to add others, whether you think about fathers that have been deployed, or mothers that don't have the right education levels, or children who just don't have access to high opportunity, or children who are obese. There are lots of ways that accumulate a couple of risk factors. We do believe in a mixed delivery system, and so their communication is difficult, but we're trying to talk to family child care and Head Start, private providers, public preschool, and we think our state standards and our assessment process helps hold that together, that we have one definition of quality and we're holding that entire system accountable. Over the last couple of years, we started to pay attention to informal settings, libraries, museums, pediatricians, and bringing them into the mix of the conversation. We had communications, strategic communications, in our strategic plan for the department from the beginning, but it was never funded, and most people couldn't get their arms around what it meant. But it's important to put it there, but then you have to put some time and energy behind it. And you know from listening to Lynn and others that building a system of early education and care is about your K-12 relationships. It's about finance, it's about governance, it's about assessment, and you have to be communicating about all those things pretty much at the same time. We started a couple of years ago to recognize that everybody I funded was a part of my communication network. That whether they liked it or not, we put it in their contract, we gave them the tagline that they had to use, this brain building in progress, because what was happening was the state was still spending $500 million and we weren't getting any buy for it, because all of the agencies that got their little grants would give it another tagline, or they'd give it another lead in line. And so we wanted to bring them together. So we have coordinated community family engagement grants. They have to talk about the work the same way, and we educate them and give them products. There's actually a website they can go to where they can put their logo on our stuff with our heading. It was important when we built Brain Building in Progress as a state initiative that we didn't compete against local. So we have Thrive in 5 Boston and Reading by 4th grade in Springfield. We brought 53 people together across the state and said, how do we create a message? And I described it as a closet, that we were going to be the rod, and that you could hang whatever kind of clothes or hanger you wanted on it, but that you had to use the rod when you were doing work with us. And we built it with them so that there was some buy-in and some ownership. So our CCR and ours, our Mass 211 number, our board, or our state advisory council in your state, all are using this kind of logo. The Boston Children's Museum was a really early adopter. They took an elephant and they put the Brain Building in Progress logo on it and moved him around the museum and gave prizes and things for children who found it. And they eventually put an apron on him so that you take something out and you learn something about child development if you got to the elephant somewhere in the museum. With Race to the Top, we were able to then go tackle our state agencies. Now, this is an overnight process. We have built partnerships with the other commissioners. We've talked a lot about child development. We have our version of a children's cabinet, but we're really now using Race to the Top dollars to have them have a child development lens on their work. The Department of Housing and Community Development, DTA, DCF, DMH, and others, as well as libraries. And then we have these formal structures. We have a 50-person advisory council in our state that was a part of our legislation, and we depend on them for transferring messages. We divided them 2 years into my tenure into roller-like groups, because they used to meet at this great big group of 50, and the idea that everybody was going to share an opinion, and the same 5 people talk every meeting. And I looked at the legislation, and I didn't have to meet with 50 people every month and let the same 5 people talk. So we divided divided it so that once a month we do a 90-minute meeting with two Roller-like groups. So we put either agencies and vendors with contracts with business and civic, or legislator with higher ed, or higher ed with K-12, or state association, so that we could have a smaller conversation and really hear what they had to say. And then we have our Board of Early Education and Care that has its 3 committees, and of course we're a state agency, so all of those meetings are public and open and give people a chance to look. We also travel those meetings around the state. That was pretty unpopular initially, but now as a part of the system that 4 times a year we move the meetings around the state so that we can run into other people that we might not see or might not be able to get to Boston. The second challenge I had was a message. People said, oh, Sherri, you're so overwhelming, you're doing all these things, we can't keep up. And I finally figured out that we were only doing 4 things. This is as frustrating to people as thinking I'm doing a lot of things. And I say, we're always doing 4 things. I tell you, it's a lose-lose, but this is a better strategy. We're doing 4 things. We're improving educator and teacher quality. We started out doing that in formal settings, and we're now doing that in informal and formal settings. So whether you work in a library or museum or in a classroom, you're an educator or a teacher, and we've got systems to help you grow. And of course, you got to do it in a lot of different ways. We're improving program quality, and we have that alphabet soup, which I also dislike, QRIS. We haven't named ours for that reason, that I didn't want that to be the goal. The goal needed to be the definitions of quality that come under that heading. And so we've got a definition of program quality, and we've now shared that by sharing the early learning standards with libraries and museums. We've shared screening and assessment with shelters and domestic violence or housing shelters as a way to get them to have higher quality programs. Lots of those agencies bring children in and they say, oh, you can go to a family shelter because you've got 3 children, and then they say, oh, now I'm only going to talk to mom for the next 6 months. So we've been trying to flip that script and say, well, if children are the entry point for DTA or DCF or DCHD, then we want children to be what you worry about in terms of not doing things that disrupt their development. We're doing screening and assessment, that's 3, and we're doing community-based screening and assessment using the ASQ, first to help families understand development, and we've always been doing formative assessment in programs, and so that's the 3rd thing we're doing, so we do that in lots of ways. And then we're doing community and family engagement, because we don't do anything that's not a support for families. Families are really the children's first teachers, and we want to support them to be able to do that. We're working hard to communicate with families. We did a survey a couple of years ago, and families said, we're still concerned about health and safety. And we have really high licensing standards, and that worried me. That wouldn't have been a problem if we hadn't also at the same time asked educators that question, what's the most important thing in early education and care? And they said health and safety. So we knew we had a problem in helping people have a broader idea, a broader definition. So we're working with United Way, using our Brain Building in Progress campaign as a way to talk to families about learning happens everywhere, environments. Environments is a big area in the quality rating and improvement system. And that the relationship matters, and so talking and going back and forth matters. And this year we'll build a campaign around those 2 things, the environments, and there's a better name for it I'm not coming up with right now, but around relationships. And we're building quality guides for parents so that they really understand each of the components. I don't think it's a rating system. You know, if you go to a restaurant and you like seafood and you go to a steak restaurant at Morton's, it doesn't matter that it's a 5-star restaurant, you don't like steak. And I think it's a mistake when we think that children and child care can be sorted into those kind of rating system levels. So we're working really hard to give the message about learning needs to be predictable and it needs to be stacked. Children need opportunities. Children need healthy indoor and outdoor environments. You are the child's first teacher, and they need to be engaged with you, but for you to be successful, you need to be in a larger social network. And that leadership needs to carry the day, that you're going to have teachers who come and go, but you got to have a way to continue the trends and the expectations of your system. And then finally, I want to communicate with people, but I want to listen. I'm actually known first for listening. In my first few years, still today, I visit programs a couple of times a week. At least one day I go out to see a program to hear what their perception or take about what we're doing is, and how is it not working on the ground, or how is it working on the ground. Having said that, you got to have your communication vehicles. So we just started in September. Again, people think we're doing 300 things, and we probably are, but we're only doing 4 if anybody asks you. We do a quick newsletter that just lists 3 big things, 3 things that we're doing that we can talk about quickly, and we email it out to people. So one month we talked about the fact that the board meeting was coming up and what they were going to talk about. We talked about the federal visit last month, what we got around Race to the Top, to let people know that was going on. We talked about our Birth to 8 grants. We're doing Birth to 8 grants in the community to try to provide that infrastructure. And we post all these news and updates on our website in a way that people can get them. I will say that a lot of folks still don't have access or don't believe they have access to internet or computers. My favorite story is we got a woman in the other day, and she talked to 10 people on my staff about how we weren't getting information to a certain population. And we said, well, you can go to the library, and we gave her the website, and we told her how to do it. And she went to the library, and she came back, and she said, that's just not going to work. The library has no computers. And I said, no, wait. That's just not right. She said, well, they won't let me use them. So my staff followed up with the library. What she had done was she had called and said, I've got 20 people I'm going to bring to the library at the same time. I want all your computers. And of course they said no. But she called us and said, there are no computers at the library, we can't get access to information. So we're also working on robocalling, believe it or not. The political season reminds you of robocalling. But as a way to give parents quick messages and really to talk to providers about what our expectations are around quality. So we do all of those things. We do our media outreach. We don't have staffing. Everybody says you don't have money for communications. That's right. I won't put this all on videotape, but my first month in the job, the first person to leave was the communications person. It was nothing about me. It was about a larger government. And you should pull the articles and read. So we've never been able to replace it. It got thought of as a spin doctor, that it was a spin for the governor versus a benefit to agencies. And so agencies have had a really hard time maintaining and keeping communication staff since then. So we do our fair share of press releases. We work really closely with the governor's office. That kind of informs them about what we're doing when we send those drafts up. We work with the Executive Office of Education, who does have a person who can pay attention to press to be able to do that. And then in terms of listening, as a part of our Race to the Top grant, I knew that in 6 weeks I couldn't get everybody to agree and buy into everything we wanted to do. We actually started about 6 weeks before doing meetings all over the state to get the big ideas. But with every one of our big ideas at Race to the Top, we have an advisory. And in the old way of advisory, people say, this is who I want to be on it, and it's the 10 people you know. And I've been really committed to sending out applications and saying, you can apply to be on this advisory around coaching and mentoring, around a postmaster certificate, around a bridge program. And we found lots of new people who weren't in the normal circuits of what we were doing. So that's another strategy for communicating. The biggest challenge, I think, at this time is that a lot of the grass tops in Massachusetts get it, but a lot of people at the grassroots think people are still telling them what to do. And we've got to flip that script. We've got to get the folks at the grassroots to believe as much as we believe that this is the right work and this is the right thing to do as we move forward trying to communicate. I think that's it.